President, please be seated. The chamber is back in session. And before I give the floor to Councillor Victor Kope to put question to the expert, the chamber received a request for additional time from the defense councils, and the chamber decided to give additional time to the Nunchia defense team until 11:40, and for Kilsampon defense team, you will have the floor after the other parties to put question to this expert. Now I give the floor to Defense Counsel Victor Kope to put question to the expert. I also would like to clarify that the Kilsampon defense team is given one session, but the floor that is given to you is at the last one, that is after the other parties.
And just to be sure, Mr. President, my request to have half hour after the lunch break until 2 o'clock, is that denied?
Well, as long as the two of you finish at the end of the first session in the afternoon.
Right. That means I have to skip a few subjects.
No, that's not the case. We give you an additional time, that is until 11:45 this morning, and then the time for Nunchia defense will conclude by that time. That is your 4 sessions. And we have 1 session for the Kilsampon Defense Council, so it means that for both defense teams, you have a combined times of 5 sessions. And we will look at the other side if they request additional time. So for you, there will be no more time granted.
Unfortunately, Mr. Morris, that means I have to drop even more. Let me finish questioning you on that mid-February 4th plenum meeting by just reading to you from Chanda, and just to see if it somehow jogs your memory in relation to things that you might have found in the Soviet archives. On English ERN 00192402, French 002-37080, and Khmer 00191-552, Chanda says the following. He talks about the mid-February 78 Politburo meeting. He talks about a momentous series of meetings in the outskirts of Ho Chi Minh City at the police training school of the fallen Thieu regime. And he says the meeting studied the nuts and bolts of the plan for setting up a Cambodian Communist Party and a resistance organization, and a bit further setting up an anti-Pol Pot resistance. Is that something that somehow refreshes your memory?
This is February 78, isn't it? Yes, yeah. Yeah, look, I'm sorry, it doesn't refresh my memory. Okay.
That's no problem. Let me move on then to my next subject. One of the very interesting findings, and I referred to it already earlier in your book, is, for instance, on page 01001762, reference to So Pim and Nuon Chia being our men. For instance, you quote Pham Van Dong saying on the 6th of November 1976, with Nguyen Chia, we are able to work better. We know him better than other leaders of Kampuchea. And Le Yon or Le Zon, Le Duan says the same thing in 76 and he repeats it in 78. Nguyen Chia is our man and my personal friend. And Nguyen Chia is a person who feels sympathy for Vietnam. My first question when you read this in the archives, was this the only things that you saw that was said about Nguyen Chia and also about So Pim?
Yes, what I quoted in my book is everything that I saw. Had I found any more, I probably would have cited it too, because it was very striking, ironic, and indicative, in my opinion, of the Vietnamese misunderstanding and miscalculation.
President, please hold on. Please change the battery for his equipment.
Nguyen Chia?
For the Defense Council for Nguyen Chia.
I think it was for everyone in the courtroom, so it's not only me. But I hear myself now, so I think it's fine again. Thank you. Sorry, you were interrupted. Could you repeat your answer, please?
The quotes that I provided in my book are everything that I would have seen. Had I seen more, I would have probably almost certainly quoted them as well. I found the Vietnamese comments strange and reflective of a misunderstanding of the real political situation inside Cambodia.
History proves your words right when it comes to Nguyen Chia. But do you have an explanation as to what made Pham Van Dong and Le Duan say that Nguyen Chia and also So Pim is our man, is a person who feels sympathy for Vietnam?
I think it's probably because of, as I understand it, Nguyen Chia's and So Pim's presence in North Vietnam during the 1950s. And that, if that's correct, if I'm correct in that, therefore the period of time there may have indicated a sympathy towards Vietnam, which the Vietnamese mistakenly concluded persisted long after those early contacts.
What makes you say that also after 1975 there weren't any contacts between So Pim and Nguyen Chia on the one hand and the Vietnamese on the other hand?
Well, I'm not aware of contacts.
No, I understand. But let me ask you the following question. If there were strong contacts between the Vietnamese Politburo members on the one hand and So Pim and Nguyen Chia on the other hand, would you agree with me that that would provide Nguyen Chia with a formidable intelligence position as to the implementation of Vietnamese ambitions?
I'm not sure that it would, because of the fact that the Vietnamese are very, as I pointed out, very evasive and often deceitful with regard to their intentions. and I'm not sure that any contacts that he would have had with the Vietnamese and both Sao Pim and Nguyen Chia would have revealed what the Vietnamese intentions were. They might have, but I'm saying it's not inevitable. That's all I'm saying.
True. All of a sudden, I'm thinking about. I cannot find it right now, but I will get the exact quote a bit later. In Chanda's book, the brother of Heng Samrin, Hem Samrin, is being quoted as saying, Pol Pot simply knew too much. He was always one step before us. That's why a military intervention was necessary. Is it possible that...
there's no question and there's no citation for that. So I don't know why it was necessary to say it if you didn't have a citation and wasn't going to ask a question about it.
Fine, let me move away from this quote. It's not important. But let me try it differently. You haven't seen contemporaneous documents or studied them. Obviously, you didn't have inside conversations with Nguyen Chia. But is it impossible that the Standing Committee of the CPK had a formidable intelligence position when it came to Vietnamese plans and its implementation?
It's possible.
Thank you. Now let me move to another subject, which is, of course, a central issue in your book. And I would like to at one point in time, go through it with some contemporaneous documents from DK that you do not know, but I would like to show them to you. Mr. President, I have prepared a binder, very small binder, with a selection of all contemporaneous DK documents relating to DK's conflict with Vietnam. And with your leave, after I have summed up the relevant documents, I would like to give that folder to the expert.
President, yes, your request is granted. Court officer, please deliver the document from the council to the expert.
Let me read for the chamber which documents I will be using, and meanwhile, maybe you can have a look at these documents already. As I said, 11 documents, and I will be referring to specific ERNs when I discuss them. The first document is E3/799. These are the minutes of a plenary meeting of Division 920 on the 7th of September 1976. Document 2 is E3/221. These are minutes of a standing committee meeting entitled Examination of the Reaction of Vietnam during the 5th meeting. And these minutes are from 14 May 1976. Document 3 is Revolutionary Youth, E3/749. It's a Revolutionary Youth from August 1975. Document 4 is E3/887. It's a report from Brother 05, which is Sarun, to Uncle 89, being Son Sen, on the 23rd of January 76. Document 5 is E3/884, a report from Chin to Office 81 of 30 August 1977. Document 6 is E3/882, a report from that same Chin to Office 81, 12 August 77. Document 7 is E3/994. It's a report from Rod to brother, unknown who, 12 August 78. Then E39741 is document 10, which is a written record of interview of me as Woon, 20 January 2014. And finally, document 11, E3/8752, which is the DC Cam interview of me as Woon. I will be returning to these documents shortly. Mr. Expert, I would like to discuss with you now, also on the basis of these documents, DK's reactions toward...
Counsel, get closer to the mic. There is an issue.
One of the central positions in your book, that is DK's reaction to Vietnamese encroachments, Vietnamese incursions into DK territory. Can you describe how in your book you qualify DK's behavior toward the encroachments on their territory?
Are you referring to the end of 1977 or 1978?
I will be referring to the temporal jurisdiction of the court, 17 April 75, until the final invasion in 78.
There were disputes about territory between the Vietnamese and the Cambodians, which go back a long time. You're asking about the DK reaction. I'm not aware of, after early 1975, of major incursions of Vietnam until the end of 1977, major incursions.
Let me see if I can assist you a bit. In your book, for instance, on 01001779, you say that you talk about, quote unquote, the bizarrely aggressive behavior of the Cambodian regime. On page 01001674, you speak about Cambodia, quote unquote, initiated armed conflict. On the next page, 01001675, excuse me, you talk about provocative military acts from DK. A word that appears often is irrational behavior, paranoid behavior. The use of those terms in relation to Vietnam's policy and its implementation of policy. Can you tell us what your central position is in your book?
I argue that in April 1977, the DK attacked a Vietnamese village, causing substantial number of civilian casualties. And again, in September of 1977, a similar act occurred, which I believe was reported by also Nyan Chanda, or Nyan Chanda was taken to see the results of that attack, which killed a lot of Vietnamese civilians. My view is that these attacks were provocations which reflected an irrationality because of the fact that Cambodia, Democratic Kampuchea, militarily was much weaker than Vietnam, and there seemed to me to be no purpose in attacking Vietnamese territory which could be defended. In other words, what I'm saying is I'm not sure what interests were served by them doing that. I don't understand the interests that were served by doing that. And moreover, I believe that it made the Vietnamese communist leadership more determined to do something about Cambodia's leadership.
Two follow-up questions. One is how is it possible for a political scientist as yourself to conclude that DK's reaction was bizarre, irrational, etc., if you haven't extensively studied contemporaneous DK documents? In other words, you speak about a 30 April 1977 attack. Isn't it true that you're only basing yourself when you say that upon a Vietnamese document, and that you do not include in that conclusion what had led up to that attack, if it ever existed?
Yes, it would be true that I have not based, I'm not aware of what may have led up to that attack, if some events did take place which led up to that attack. But sorry, just let me just say one thing. If there were events leading up to that attack, that is, provocations on the Vietnamese side of some kind, attacking Vietnamese villages seems to me to be not the appropriate response.
That is certainly up for debate, and a very interesting question. But then, before I go to the actual documents, let me refer you to what Douglas Pike said in November '78 before U.S. Congress. He also, at the time, obviously was not in possession of any DK internal communication documents. And this is what he said at E3/2370, English ERN 00187-396, and French only 003-44747. It's from that same excerpt on conclusions that I read out to you before. And he says, under point 5, the present border war, he's talking in November '78, the present border war, which is actually inter-Nissan or Nissin, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, communist conflict, has been going on since at least 1970. Neither side can be condemned as instigator, neither is simply a victim. And then, most importantly, point 7, Cambodian behavior in the war is not as irrational as appears. There is logic both to Cambodian strategy and rhetoric, particularly when viewed in the light of Cambodian history. End of quote. Now, he seems, maybe I'm wrong, to go into a different direction as to DK's behavior in reaction of Vietnamese behavior and policy. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct. But just to go back to your earlier question, part of my reaction to DK behavior and my conclusion that it was irrational goes back to the period 1970 to 75, during the war against the Lon Nol government. And at that time, the DK forces came to the conclusion that Vietnam was the #1 enemy, whilst objectively speaking, trying to put oneself in the shoes of the DK, I would not think that the Vietnam was the #1 enemy. It may be an enemy, but not the #1 enemy. The #1 enemy was the Lon Nol government, who they were attempting to overthrow, and to have tried to drive the North Vietnamese forces out of Cambodia when the North Vietnamese forces were helping the DK forces, as they later came to be known, the insurgency led by Pol Pot, to try and drive the Vietnamese out of Cambodia at the same time as Vietnam was assisting the Khmer insurgency, seemed to me to be irrational. So there was a pattern which I applied in my thinking about what happened in 1977 and 1978. There is other evidence in the book, as you know, which, for example, talking about ignoring the disparity of strength between Cambodia and Vietnam in terms of armed forces and so on. I go into that in quite a lot of detail. So my conclusions about irrationality in these particular cases are not based on those particular cases alone.
Before I go to the documents that I've just handed out to you, and which we believe strongly contest the irrationality of certain behavior, let me first read to you Nguyen Chia's views or position as to Vietnamese ambitions and its implementation. This is something he said in January 1978. That was a speech of Nguyen Chia celebrating the visit of Zhu Enlai's widow, a visit of her to Cambodia early '78. It was right after the cutting off of the diplomatic relations with Vietnam. Mr. President, this is document E3/1407. English ERN S00008683, French S0067052, I'm sorry, Khmer 00657-406. This is what Nguyen Chia says. Our Cambodian people always make efforts to have close, friendly relations with all countries, far and near, based firmly on the principles of respect for each other's independence and territorial integrity, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, non-aggression, equality and mutual benefit, and in line with the policies of independence, peace, and non-alignment, as indicated in the Constitution of Democratic Cambodia. However, our Cambodian people will struggle resolutely against the acts of sabotage and subversion from within, aimed at staging a coup d'etat to topple democratic Cambodia, against the nibbling acts in the border area, and all acts of aggression and expansion from without. End of quote. He doesn't refer to Vietnam. It's obvious which country he speaks about. But I would like to put it to you that this is a statement reflecting completely rational and coherent behavior in terms of foreign policy. Would you agree?
I would agree that it appears that way.
I was expecting that answer, and that will bring me now to leading you to those documents. If you could have a look with me to the first document. I've highlighted the relevant excerpts for you. Mr. President, first document E3799, English ERN 00184777, French 003233914 and further, and Khmer 000835157 and further. It's a small document, a few pages. Here is Son Sen, the chief commander and member of the Standing Committee, addressing members of Division 920 on the 7th of September 1976. You agree with me, I'm sure, that this is a document which was absolutely an internal document and which was not supposed to ever go out. It did. Here he says the following on page 5 of that document. Our revolution is a socialist revolution and already is a deep one. So toward Vietnam, we take the following stances. One, we won't be the ones who make trouble. 2, but we must defend our territory absolutely, and absolutely not let anyone either take it or violate it. 3, if Vietnam invades, we will ask them to withdraw, and if they do not withdraw, we will attack. I realize this is the first time you see this document, but what would be your first reaction?
Well, I mean, I can only take it at face value, and I don't know the context in which it was issued, the statement was issued. It suggests that there were not serious problems between the two countries at that time, but there was a fear that there could be problems between the two countries in the future.
I understand. I'm asking you face value reaction. That's not easy. But in terms of foreign policy, military policy toward Vietnam at that time, does this sound to you in any way irrational, bizarre, or whichever qualification you would like to give?
No, it doesn't.
Now let me move to the
Incidentally, I would like to say that people who behave bizarrely or irrationally don't necessarily behave bizarrely or irrationally all the time.
That is true. That's why we move on to the second document, to show you there's consistency. Mr. Morris, there is document E3221, your document 2. Here again it's Son Sen talking. This time not vertically, but really horizontally to his direct peers in the Standing Committee. Present are our client, Nguyen Chia, Pol Pot, Ieng Sary, Vorn Vet, Khieu Samphan, Comrade Ya from the northeast region. And here's what he says when he discusses the border problem. And I would like you to go to the green, or the part that I highlighted. Mr. President, that is ERN 001-82696, French 003-86 178, Khmer 0000813. So this is what Comrade Q Son Sen tells inter alia Nuon Chea. Along the border, they keep on coming in non-stop. We did not go looking to make trouble with them at all. According to experience, if they come in when we do not chase after them and they do not go. But when we get strict, that's when they go. That is in Ratanakiri, in Mondulkiri. That is in Ratanakiri. In Mondulkiri, we do not attack them at all. We respect the instructions of the party absolutely and do not let it get tense. End of quote. There are some interesting other excerpts, but because of time I will limit myself to that one. Again, the same question. Does that strike you as irrational?
No, it does not. But I'd like to have more context on who they are, whether they are Vietnamese forces or whether they are civilians from Mondulkiri, because as you, I'm sure, know, civilian populations of the Cambodian side and the Vietnamese side near Mondulkiri, Ratanakiri would have a lot in common. And whether there's considered to be violations by civilians, by state officials or by soldiers seems to me to be an important issue.
I understand what you're saying. That's why it's not only documents at the very high level I will be showing you, but also documents from coming down upward. But let me now go to document 3, which is an excerpt from Revolutionary Youth, meant to educate young cadres. It's a document, Revolutionary Youth, from August 1975. It's E3/749. Oh, I see.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a question in order to understand what is happening. We would like to know if the documents that are presented by the Nuon Chea Council were sent to the expert before. Was the expert made aware of the documents before testifying, or is he discovering these documents for the first time? Because we checked, these documents are on the list, but it appears that the expert is only discovering them now. So I just want to understand what is happening.
I'm sure Mr. Morris is able to give the answer himself. I think this is the first time that you see the documents, correct?
Correct. This is the first time I have seen these documents.
Which is, but I haven't intervened earlier because with this expert I don't have a big problem. But if you feel uncomfortable to give an answer because you would need to read the whole document, you tell us, please. But I certainly leave that to you.
And if I may follow up on this, Judge Vance, I was under the impression that I would be able to question until 2, and I had planned to give the documents to him in the lunch break. But that's unfortunately not possible. So, Mr. Morris, Revolutionary Youth, Document 3, English ERN 00532686, Khmer 003991114, French 00593942. It is instructed to all youth cadres as follows, and I quote, "Along the borders, it is imperative to be vigilant and not to do anything to cause trouble with the foreign neighboring people. However, it is also imperative to absolutely defend and counter and not allow them to violate or insult our nation and our people." End of quote. This is an instruction which, of course, goes much broader Again, on the face of it, does that seem to be an irrational instruction to young cadres?
No, it doesn't seem to be an irrational instruction to young cadres. I want to emphasize, though, to you and to the court that this time period which the document refers to, 1976, if I'm not mistaken, is, this is issued from August 75, actually, sorry. This was not a period of which I regard as high tension between the two countries. There was some tension over the islands, but some islands, disputed territory. But this was not the period in which there was very high tension, which from my analysis, began in 1977.
We do have documents from that period as well. Let me see if I can move on to the next document, document 4, which is for U4, which is E3/887. This is actually, as I said earlier, an instruction or a telegram going from down upward. You can see it is written by 05, that is Commander Arun. I think I said it correctly. It is directed to Uncle 89, that's a code name for Son Sen. English ERN, it's only one page, English ERN 00185223, Khmer 000214448, French 002839096. This is what he writes to Son Sen. In the night of 22 January 76, the Vietnamese secretly came to our camp at the front and at the back, attacking our patrol guards. 3. We have not attacked them. We still negotiate firmly, because that is our land. 5. I'm organizing the forces while testing and waiting for the final decision from the party. As in the above report, request to attack any place where there are Vietnamese. Only if they are on Cambodian land, I will attack them all. Yet there has been no final decision from Ankara. I implemented in a way politically mature by trying to tolerate it. We have not counterfired even a bullet, while we are awaiting Ankara's advice first. And down, we have not fought back yet. Again, I understand first reaction. Does that sound like out of control, irrational behavior on the actual border between DK and Vietnam?
No, it does not.
Let me take one more document, and then I have to finish, I'm afraid. This is also a very interesting document because it talks about negotiations as well. It's document 5 for you, E3/884. Let me guide you through it. It's English ERNs 00182762, Khmer 00001237, French 00386 Our people and Revolutionary Army has a good and pure will toward the people and Vietnamese Army, who is a neighbor. We do not wish to have any conflict with Vietnam. Through my observation of past events, when Comrade, the Vietnamese, invaded us to a certain extent, Comrade always alleged us first that we had invaded Comrade to this and that degree. For us, we would like to reaffirm that we will not violate anything, even a small thing belonging to Vietnam. However, we will always absolutely defend our independence and territorial integrity based on the current border. And then further down, paragraph 3, where he says, we take assumptions on Vietnamese main aims that the state of not stopping provoking border conflicts is also directly meant to delete or avert the public attention to severe situation provoked by Vietnam. Again, first reaction?
No, this must be taken in the context of what was happening on the ground at the time, and I simply do not know whether the events described at the beginning of the document, the events described actually took place or not. That would determine whether I thought it was irrational or not. There's nothing in the words that is irrational, obviously.
I understand. Let me move away because of time from these documents and go back to an area that you are well familiar with. Can you describe Cambodia's or DK's foreign relations with Thailand, or DK's behavior or attitude towards Laos, for instance? Because of time, let me go straight to the point. Isn't it true that up from 77 and 78, the relations with the Thai neighbors were very good, and that the trouble that was taking place at the border, the Thai authorities blamed third parties or other parties for this, and not Central Command, and that ultimately the relations with Thailand and DK were good and stayed good?
I think that one can't draw too many conclusions from the initial Thai reaction to fighting on the border between Cambodia and Thailand, which took place in 1978. The Thais are not people who are belligerent and aggressive. They don't like to resolve conflicts by force necessarily. They prefer to try and negotiate settlements. I think that they initially probably thought, as was reasonable, that there may have been some local commander who was acting on his own, but the consistency and persistence of these attacks against Thailand in 1976 would have caused the Thais to eventually regard this as somehow or other a central policy. I'm not sure how far there were instructions from the centre to the border areas to carry out these policies, but it seems strange that they persisted if there was not some kind of central authorization to carry out attacks against the Thais.
Well, let me read back to you what you wrote yourself. On English ERN page 01001748, when you discuss these border troubles, and I quote you, "The two most important Thai government leaders refused to attribute blame to the DK leadership in Phnom Penh." On page 01001742, Thai Foreign Minister Apadit Pacharian Khan at a banquet talks about attacks not from Central Command, but from, quote unquote, a third party. And let me move on. Chanda is saying that at one point after the Vietnamese invasion, as he says, Bangkok was scared that the tanks would roll further, even into Thailand. So if you compare the situation with Thailand to Vietnam, wouldn't you agree with me that in relation to Thailand, DK's behavior was very rational, not bizarre at all?
I don't necessarily agree. At a time when DK was involved in a very serious conflict, large-scale conflict with Vietnam, the last thing they needed was to have a conflict with their Western neighbor. And if, in fact, there had been local commanders carrying out provocative acts against Thailand, I would have thought that the central authorities in Phnom Penh would have shut that down immediately. And I'm surprised that they didn't, and that's why I regarded their persistence in these attacks as somehow or other reflection of attitudes from the Central Command. As for the Thai attitude, I think I answered that earlier. The Thais went out of their way to try and avoid conflict. That's their way of behaving in foreign policy. They're conflict avoidance people.
Again, a very interesting topic that I would like to discuss with you further, but I'm afraid I cannot. Let me move away to another topic that I would briefly like to touch upon. Throughout your book, you refer to the CPK as not only Maoist, but even hyper-Maoist. I'm not sure what that is, but can you explain why it is that the CPK is Maoist? And if you can also take into consideration what Heather called the myth of the CPK being Maoist.
I think that the Communist Party of Kampuchea was Maoist in its orientation because a lot of the domestic policies of democratic Kampuchea were in fact modeled on the Great Leap Forward, taking people to the countryside from the cities, emphasis on manual labor as a form of personal liberation. These things were ideas of Mao Zedong, and I believe that the reason I use the word hyper-Maoist is because the Democratic Kampuchea's leadership felt that they should go faster and further than Mao did in China in attempting to achieve what they considered to be a pure communist state. There was a frantic sense of need to go faster and to create what the DK leaders thought would be the purest form of communist revolution. I don't know that there's what Hedder is referring to as the influence of the Vietnamese on the Kampuchean communist movement to some extent. And I think that there was a Vietnamese influence, but I think that the Maoist influence was more important.
My client is not sitting here, and of course I'm not allowed to testify on his behalf, but he would be very upset if he were ever to be called a Maoist. let me refer to make my point to an important Vietnamese ideologist, Trong Chin. Can you tell the chamber who Trong Chin was and what was how would you describe the way he saw Marxist-Leninist ideology?
Trong Chin was a member of the Politburo of the Communist Party of Vietnam. Trong Chin's Vietnamese for Long March, indicating an affinity for Maoist China. Trong Chin was the Secretary General of the party during the time of great Chinese influence over the Vietnamese in the early 1950s. After the so-called land reform, which was in fact a terror campaign initiated by the Vietnamese communists against their civilian population, after it got out of hand and led to uprisings in parts of Vietnam, Trong Chin was demoted from the position of Secretary General and largely blamed. So he was probably the man most connected with China in the Vietnamese leadership. The Vietnamese leadership, from my studies, was always factionalized between a pro-Chinese, a more pro-Soviet, and a third-party neutralist or independent faction. And there were often struggles for power, for policy decisions between these factions. So Trong Chin was representative of the pro-Chinese faction.
Maybe I think if you back down a bit, because when you speak in the microphone too closely, then
distortion.
Yeah. Are you in essence, in summarizing, saying that Trong Chin was a Maoist?
Matang.
President, please hold on, Mr. Expert.
I think Trong Chin, the Vietnamese Communist Party did not follow the Chinese Communist Party's policies after 1956. They followed all the Chinese Communist Party institutional policies up until 1956. But then, as a result of the Great Leap Forward, as a result of the 100 Flowers campaign, and that getting out of control and demands for liberalization in Vietnam, they shut down the 100 Flowers campaign, and they did not go further in subsequent years in copying the Chinese policies such as the Great Leap Forward. To ask the question, would I consider Trong Chin a Maoist? I would say perhaps he was a soft-core Maoist, and I would regard the leaders of Democratic Kampuchea as hardcore Maoist in their ideological orientation. That means that they were inspired by the policies of Mao Zedong.
But so was Ho Chi Minh. They were all paying tribute to Mao Zedong thought, but that didn't make the Vietnamese communists or the Vietnamese Marxist-Leninist Maoist. Don't you agree with me?
That's because the Vietnamese ceased to emulate the Chinese after 1956 as a result of their bad experience of Maoism in destabilizing their political control to some extent in 1956. So I think that they stepped back and they tended to go more towards, whilst retaining some of the institutions of Maoist China, the basic social institutions, they stopped emulating all the Maoist Chinese policies.
Just to wrap up this point, and I'm discussing it because it's very crucial for my client. I will give the reference shortly, Mr. President. The direct quote is to be questioned, but it is indeed correct that in Ted Sambat and Gina Chon's book relating interviews with Nguyen Chia says that by far the biggest influence on his ideology or his vision of Marxism-Leninism is Trong Chin. If that is indeed the case, how would you then describe the ideology of Nguyen Chia?
Well, I think that if Nguyen Chia is saying that Trong Chin was the most influential of the Vietnamese communist leaders with regard to him, he's conceding that the Chinese orientation faction of the Vietnamese party was influential on the Cambodian Communist Party. But I think that one has to look at what actually happened in the state of democratic Kampuchea to come to a conclusion about whether they are ideological or not and what was the inspiration. And I just find it very hard to avoid the conclusion that Maoist China was the big inspirational influence upon Pol Pot and other members. I don't know if there was a disagreement between Nguyen Chia and Pol Pot. I don't know over these questions. I doubt it. In terms of what I've seen of Nguyen Chia say about Pol Pot, his deference towards Pol Pot, his respect for Pol Pot, there could have been some small differences. But look, the Cambodian Revolution must be understood in terms of what it actually did, not only in terms of what they actually said.
Now let me move to, let's see if I can squeeze in two more subjects. In your book, 01001772, you speak about the propaganda campaign of the Vietnamese that started right after the cutting off of diplomatic relations in 1978. On that same page, you speak about an attempt to legitimize its impending overthrow of the Cambodian communist regime. Most importantly, on 01001881, you speak about a meeting in early 1978 between Vietnam and a Soviet propaganda department delegation. Can you explain what that meeting was about? Who were the members of that Soviet delegation?
I'm sorry, that detail of the book escapes me for the moment.
I understand. But is it fair to say that immediately after the cutting off of diplomatic relations, the Soviets, and I presume also the East Germans and others, came in to assist the Vietnamese in their propaganda efforts?
Undoubtedly.
Douglas Pike in E3/2370 also talks about propaganda, English ERN 0018738.
President, Council, please repeat the EON number because the interpreter could not get it.
Certainly. E3/2370, no Khmer ERN, English 001873889, French 00344740. This is what Douglas Pike tells Congress. Both sides make bids for world public opinion. The Vietnamese far more skillfully than the Cambodians. End of quote. Is that something that you would agree with? And if yes, why?
Yes, I would agree with that, and I think that's because the Vietnamese have a long history of, a much more detailed history of training by the Soviets and the Chinese in these arts of propaganda.
Now, allow me to fast forward to the present. You are a political scientist. Are you still today studying Russian foreign policy, and more particularly Russian propaganda and Russian quote-unquote disinformation campaigns, for instance, when it comes to Ukraine or Syria?
Yes, I'm certainly paying close attention to these disinformation campaigns, especially as regard to Ukraine.
Are you able to draw a comparison between Soviet-assisted propaganda, possibly disinformation in '78, in relation to Vietnam and Cambodia, and now?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that back in 1978, the Soviets were simply repeating the Vietnamese line on Cambodia. I think that the Vietnamese were skillful in their own right in propaganda, agitation and propaganda. They didn't need the Soviets to teach them as late as 1978. They'd been learning it for decades. And I think that the Soviets simply followed along with the Vietnamese line because they were aligned.
Now, maybe I can phrase it differently. One of the most puzzling things to me, and to others hopefully as well, is why it was that Vietnam, which was a pro-Soviet Stalinist country, why were they believed when they said it was DK who started this whole thing? It was DK that provoked. Why on earth would you believe these pro-Soviet Vietnamese?
Are you asking why would I believe?
No.
I'm not clear either.
It's,
who,
let me rephrase. It seems that not necessarily in the beginning, but later, scholars, diplomats, whoever is interested in what happened between 75 and 79 seem to believe, seem to buy, without any reservation, the Vietnamese propaganda side of the story, namely that it is because those permanent DK incursions we were forced to invade. Can you shed some light on this?
Could I ask for a clarification of the question, because I think it changed. I understood Council's first question was why believe that Cambodia attacked Vietnam first? Or is Council asking what was the motivation for the Vietnamese invasion? Was it those incursions? Those are two very different questions. I think it'd be clearer if the records...
And characterizing it as propaganda, it's an additional element.
I have no other words than describe it as propaganda, coming from pro-Soviet Vietnamese. But let me rephrase. The far more skillful propaganda campaign of the Vietnamese, together with the Soviets, says it's the CPK and DK who started those provocations, those incursions. We had to react. They started attacking us in April 77. We couldn't do anything else. Is it correct, first of all, that this at one point is now accepted as correct? And if yes, how is that possible?
Look, we have limited information about what was actually going on between Vietnam and Cambodia. You have just presented the court with a series of documents from Democratic Cambodia, which I presume comes from DC Cam. Certainly, most people will not be familiar with these documents, nor the context. You know, based upon the little we knew or the little we know, that was the conclusion that was drawn. I don't think it was because of Vietnamese propaganda. I think that people saw the results. I mean, Vietnamese propaganda certainly played a role, but I think that people couldn't see another explanation.
Then one final follow-up question. Do you agree with me that after Vietnam's invasion and subsequent occupation of Cambodia for 10 years led to Vietnam, in the eyes of the diplomatic international community, as a pariah nation?
Yes, it did.
And why was that?
Because the Vietnamese didn't simply overthrow the regime of Democratic Kampuchea, but they occupied the country for 10 years and attempted to create a regime in their own image in Cambodia. And therefore, most people regarded the Vietnamese activity as not simply a defensive one, but an offensive one in order to create a client state in Cambodia.
But isn't it true that had there not been a Soviet veto in the Security Council in 1979 January, the international community would have condemned Vietnam for violating the UN Charter, for intolerable acts of aggression, that only because of this Soviet veto didn't happen?
I think that is true. We see in the votes of the General Assembly year after year a vote against the Vietnamese presence in Cambodia and a demand for Vietnamese troops to withdraw. Those votes increased year after year from after 1979. And I think that this leads to the conclusion that a majority, a huge majority of the international community was opposed to the Vietnamese invasion of Cambodia, and particularly the occupation of Cambodia for 10 years.
And my final, very last question, you agree with me that the invasion was anything but a humanitarian intervention?
Yes, I don't believe that in its intention the Vietnamese invasion was a humanitarian one. I don't think humanitarian values are part of the ethos of the Politburo of the Vietnamese Communist Party, although there may have been humanitarian consequences of the invasion. That wasn't the intention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
President, thank you. It is now convenient time for lunch break. The chamber will take a break from now until 1:30. Court officer, please assist the expert at the waiting room reserved for him during the lunch break and invite him back into the courtroom at 1:30. Security personnel are instructed to bring Khieu Samphan to the waiting room downstairs and bring him back to the courtroom at 1:30. The court is now in recess.